It was a normal Tuesday morning when the world changed forever. The sun rose as usual over Earth's bustling cities and quiet countryside. People went about their daily routines, unaware that high above them, something extraordinary was happening. In the control room of the International Space Station, astronaut Sarah Chen floated weightlessly, sipping her morning coffee. Her eyes widened as she looked at the main screen. "What the hell?" she muttered, spilling a few drops of coffee that floated away in tiny spheres. The screen showed hundreds, no, thousands of objects appearing out of nowhere just beyond the moon's orbit. At first, Sarah thought it was a glitch. She tapped the screen, then hit a few buttons to run a diagnostic. But the objects were still there, growing larger by the second. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the communication panel. "Houston, this is ISS. We have a situation up here. You need to see this." Down on Earth, in the NASA Control Center, alarms started blaring. Technicians and scientists rushed to their stations, their faces pale with shock as they saw the feed from the ISS. "Those can't be asteroids," one scientist said, his voice shaking. "They're moving too fast, too organized." As the objects drew closer, their shapes became clearer. They weren't rocks or debris. They were ships. Massive ships of various sizes and designs, all heading straight for Earth. Within hours, the alien fleet had positioned itself in Earth's orbit. Their ships blocked out the sun in many areas, casting enormous shadows over cities and oceans. People around the world looked up in awe and fear, their phones and cameras pointed at the sky. In Washington, D.C., President Elena Rodriguez sat in the Oval Office, surrounded by her top advisors and military leaders. The room was tense, filled with the sound of urgent whispers and ringing phones. "Madam President," General Thompson said, his face grim, "we've tried every possible method of communication. Radio, light signals, even old Morse code. They're not responding." President Rodriguez nodded, her jaw clenched tight. "What about our defenses?" The general shook his head. "Our missiles would be like pebbles against their hulls. We're completely outmatched." Just then, every screen in the room flickered to life. The same thing happened on televisions, computers, and phones all over the world. A face appeared, distinctly alien, with gray-blue skin and large dark eyes. The alien spoke, its words translated into every Earth language simultaneously. "People of Earth, we are the Galactic Council. For too long, your planet has remained isolated from the greater galactic community. That ends today. You have two choices: submit to our rule and join us as a protectorate, or face extinction. You have 24 hours to decide." The transmission cut off, leaving the world in stunned silence. In the Oval Office, President Rodriguez stood up, her face a mask of determination. "Get me in touch with every world leader. Now." As governments around the world scrambled to respond, ordinary people reacted in various ways. Some panicked, rushing to stores to stock up on supplies. Others gathered in churches, mosques, and temples to pray. Many huddled with their families, unsure of what the future would bring. In New York City, John Kim stood on the roof of his apartment building, staring up at the alien ships that loomed over the city. His neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Patel, joined him. "Do you think this is the end?" Mrs. Patel asked, her voice trembling. John shook his head. "I don't know. But whatever happens, we're all in this together now." As the first day under the shadow of the Galactic Council came to an end, humanity faced its greatest challenge. The next 24 hours would determine the fate of every man, woman, and child on Earth. Little did they know, deep beneath the surface, a secret slumbered, a secret that would change everything. As the world grappled with the Galactic Council's ultimatum, a secret meeting was taking place deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. In a hidden bunker known only to a select few, the highest-ranking military leaders from around the globe gathered. General Maria Alvarez of the United States stood at the head of a long table, her face illuminated by the glow of computer screens. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "It's time we discuss our last resort." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she meant, but nobody wanted to be the first to say it out loud. Finally, Colonel Yuki Tanaka of Japan spoke up. "Are you suggesting we wake them, the sleepers?" General Alvarez nodded solemnly. "I am." Murmurs filled the room. For decades, only a handful of people knew about the existence of the sleepers, ancient, powerful beings that had been hidden on Earth for thousands of years. "But the risks," began General Hans Müller of Germany, only to be cut off by Alvarez. "I know the risks," she said firmly. "But faced with extinction or submission to alien rule, do we have any other choice?" As the military leaders debated, Dr. Emily Wong, the lead scientist in charge of monitoring the sleepers, stepped forward. She pulled up images on the main screen showing 7 massive, humanoid figures in stasis pods. "These beings," Dr. Wong explained, "have power beyond our comprehension. From what we've gathered from ancient texts and the limited data we have, they once ruled the galaxy. But for reasons unknown, they chose to enter a deep sleep here on Earth." The room was quiet as everyone absorbed this information. The existence of the sleepers had been Earth's most closely guarded secret for generations. Now they might be humanity's only hope. "What happens if we wake them?" asked General Okoye of Nigeria. Dr. Wong shook her head. "We don't know for sure. They might save us, or they might destroy us all." As the debate raged on in the bunker, the world above continued to panic. In London, people crowded into underground stations, seeking shelter from the alien ships that loomed overhead. In Rio de Janeiro, thousands gathered on the beaches, holding candlelight vigils and praying for salvation. Back in Washington, D.C., President Rodriguez was on a secure video call with other world leaders. They had spent hours discussing possible responses to the Galactic Council's demands. "We cannot submit," declared the Chinese president, his face grim on the screen. "But how can we fight?" Just then, President Rodriguez received an urgent message. Her eyes widened as she read it. "My friends," she said to the other leaders, "I've just been informed of a possible solution. But I warn you, it's as dangerous as it is incredible." Meanwhile, in a small town in Kansas, teenager Mike Anderson snuck out of his house, despite his parents' warnings to stay inside. He met his friends in an empty field, all of them looking up at the alien ships that filled the night sky. "Do you think anyone's going to save us?" asked Lisa, Mike's best friend. Mike shrugged, trying to appear braver than he felt. "Maybe the government has some secret weapon they're not telling us about." Little did Mike know how close to the truth he was. Back in the underground bunker, General Alvarez called for a vote. "We're out of time," she said, her voice echoing in the tense room. "Do we wake the sleepers?" One by one, the military leaders cast their votes. The decision was far from unanimous, but in the end, the majority agreed. It was time to awaken Earth's ancient guardians. As Dr. Wong began the preparations to revive the sleepers, General Alvarez couldn't help but wonder, were they about to save humanity, or had they just signed its death warrant? The clock was ticking. In less than 12 hours, the Galactic Council would demand Earth's answer. And deep beneath the ground, something ancient and powerful was about to stir. As the world above held its breath, a small team of elite soldiers and scientists descended deep into the Earth. They traveled in a high-speed elevator, dropping thousands of feet below the surface. The air grew colder and the walls seemed to press in around them. Dr. Emily Wong stood at the front of the group, her hands tightly gripping a tablet. Beside her, Captain Jack Harper of the U.S. Special Forces kept his hand on his weapon, ready for anything. "We're approaching the chamber," Dr. Wong announced, her voice barely above a whisper. The elevator slowed to a stop, and the doors opened with a soft hiss. The team stepped out into a massive cavern, lit by eerie blue lights. In the center of the cavern stood 7 enormous pods, each easily the size of a house. "Those are the sleepers," Captain Harper asked, his eyes wide with awe. Dr. Wong nodded. Beings of immense power, dormant for millennia, and we're about to wake them up. The team moved quickly, setting up their equipment around the first pod. Dr. Wong's fingers flew over her tablet, inputting complex codes and sequences. Beginning revival process for Sleeper 1, she announced. A low hum filled the cavern, growing louder with each passing second. The pod began to glow, pulsing with an otherworldly light. The ground beneath their feet trembled. Is this normal? One of the soldiers asked nervously. Before Dr. Wong could answer, a crack appeared in the surface of the pod. Then another, and another. The team stumbled back as the pod split open, releasing a cloud of ancient air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a massive figure began to rise from the broken pod. The sleeper was humanoid, but far larger than any human. It stood at least 15 feet tall, its skin a shifting pattern of deep blues and purples. Its eyes opened, glowing with an inner light. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, but Captain Harper held up his hand. "Hold your fire," he shouted. The sleeper looked down at the humans, its expression unreadable. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Why have you awakened me?" it asked in perfect English. Dr. Wong stepped forward, her voice shaking slightly. "Great One, we need your help. Our world is under threat from an alien force called the Galactic Council. They demand our submission, or they'll destroy us." The sleeper's eyes narrowed. "The Galactic Council," it rumbled. "They still exist." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring from Dr. Wong's equipment. "The other pods," she gasped. "They're all activating." One by one, the remaining pods cracked open. 6 more beings emerged, each as awe-inspiring as the first. They gathered around the humans, their massive forms towering over the team. "You have made a grave decision in awakening us," the first sleeper said. "Do you understand the consequences of your actions?" Captain Harper stepped forward. "With all due respect," he said, his voice steady despite his fear, "we're facing extinction. Whatever the consequences, they can't be worse than that." The sleepers exchanged looks, communicating silently among themselves. Finally, the first one spoke again. "Very well. We will help you. But know this. Our power is not to be taken lightly. We once ruled the stars, and our awakening may bring more than just the Galactic Council to your doorstep." Dr. Wong's tablet beeped urgently. She looked at it, her face paling. "We're out of time," she said. "The Galactic Council is demanding Earth's answer." The first sleeper nodded. "Then let us go to the surface. It's time the Galactic Council remembered why they feared us." As the team prepared to return to the surface with the sleepers, Captain Harper couldn't shake a feeling of both hope and dread. They had awakened beings of immense power, possibly saving Earth from the Galactic Council. But at what cost? The sleepers moved towards the elevator, their steps shaking the ground. As they ascended towards the surface, the fate of not just Earth, but possibly the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. As the elevator ascended, carrying the sleepers and the human team to the surface, tension filled the air. Dr. Wong and Captain Harper exchanged nervous glances, both wondering what would happen when these ancient beings reached the world above. The first sleeper, who had introduced itself as Zor, turned to Dr. Wong. "Tell us, little one, how much does your kind know of us?" Dr. Wong swallowed hard. "Very little, great Zor. We found ancient texts that spoke of powerful beings sleeping beneath the earth, but much of it was unclear." Zor nodded slowly. "Then it is time you learned the truth of who we are, and why we slumber." As the elevator continued its long journey upward, Zor began to speak. Its voice resonated with power and age, filling the small space with tales of a time long past. "Eons ago, we ruled the stars," Zor said. "Our empires spanned galaxies. We had power beyond your imagination. We could create or destroy worlds with a thought." The other sleepers nodded in agreement, their eyes glowing with memories of their former glory. But with great power comes great temptation, Zor continued. Some of us began to abuse our abilities. Wars broke out among our kind. Entire star systems were wiped from existence in our battles. Captain Harper listened intently, his hand unconsciously tightening on his weapon. What happened then? He asked. We realized the danger we posed to the universe, another sleeper, named Elia, answered. In our conflicts, we had destroyed more than we had ever created. We knew we had to stop. Zor picked up the story again. We came to Earth, a young planet full of potential. Here we decided to enter a deep slumber, to remove our influence from the galaxy and allow other races to evolve without our interference. Dr. Wang's eyes widened with understanding. You chose to sleep, to protect the universe from yourselves. Yes, Zor replied solemnly. And now you have awakened us. You must understand the gravity of this decision. Just then, the elevator slowed to a stop. They had reached the surface. As the doors opened, sunlight streamed in, illuminating the sleepers in all their otherworldly glory. They stepped out into a military base, where rows of soldiers stood at attention, their faces a mix of awe and fear. In the distance, the massive ships of the Galactic Council loomed in the sky. President Rodriguez stepped forward, her face pale but determined. On behalf of Earth, I welcome you, she said, her voice only slightly shaking. Zor looked down at her, its expression unreadable. Your welcome is appreciated, but premature. You have awakened us to face a threat, but we ourselves may prove to be a greater danger. The president's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Our power is not easily controlled, Elia explained. Even now, being awake, we risk drawing the attention of forces far beyond your comprehension. Forces that make the Galactic Council look insignificant in comparison. A hush fell over the crowd as the implications of these words sank in. Are you saying we shouldn't have woken you? Captain Harper asked, a note of frustration in his voice. We are saying, Zor replied, that you must be prepared for the consequences. We will help you with the Galactic Council, but our awakening may have set in motion events that could threaten not just your world, but the entire universe. President Rodriguez straightened her back, meeting Zor's gaze. We understand the risk, she said firmly. But our people face extinction or enslavement. We had to take this chance. Zor nodded slowly. Very well. But remember this warning. The universe is vast and full of dangers you cannot imagine. In awakening us, you have opened a door that cannot easily be closed. As if to emphasize Zor's words, the ground began to tremble. In the sky, the Galactic Council's ships began to move, descending towards Earth. The time for warnings was over. The confrontation was about to begin. As the Galactic Council's ships descended, world leaders gathered in an emergency video conference. The sleepers' warning echoed in their minds, adding a new layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. President Rodriguez addressed her colleagues, her face grim on screens around the world. We face an unprecedented dilemma, she began. The Galactic Council threatens our freedom, but the sleepers warn that their full awakening could endanger the entire universe. The Chinese president leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Can we not use the sleepers to simply drive away the council, then ask them to return to their slumber? It's not that simple, Dr. Wang interjected. She had been invited to join the call to provide scientific insight. The very act of the sleepers using their power could attract the attention of cosmic forces we can't even comprehend. Debate erupted among the world leaders. Some argued for full deployment of the sleepers, willing to risk unknown consequences to save Earth. Others advocated for negotiating with the Galactic Council, fearing that the sleepers might be an even greater threat. As the arguments raged on, the Galactic Council made its move. Small ships detached from the main fleet, descending towards major cities around the globe. In New York, panic spread as a ship the size of a skyscraper hovered over Central Park. Its shadow cast the bustling city into an eerie twilight. Similar scenes played out in London, Tokyo, Moscow, and dozens of other cities worldwide. Back at the military base, the sleepers watched the unfolding events with ancient, knowing eyes. Zor turned to President Rodriguez, who had stepped away from the video conference to consult with them. "Your kind must make a choice," Zor said, its voice resonating with power. "But know this, once we fully awaken our powers, we cannot easily return to slumber. The consequences will ripple across the cosmos." President Rodriguez ran a hand through her hair, the weight of the world heavy on her shoulders. "And if we don't use your power, if we face the Galactic Council alone?" Elia, another of the sleepers, spoke up. "Your civilization would likely fall. The Council's technology far surpasses your own." Just then, Captain Harper rushed up, his face pale. "Madam President," he said, saluting quickly, "we're receiving reports of attacks. The Council ships are using some kind of energy weapon to disable our power grids. Around the world, cities went dark. Hospitals switched to emergency generators. Communication networks faltered. Fear gripped the populace as the reality of the alien threat became all too clear." President Rodriguez clenched her fists, torn between impossible choices: use the sleepers and risk cosmic consequences, or face the Galactic Council and almost certain defeat. In that moment of indecision, Zor placed a massive hand on her shoulder. Despite its size, the touch was gentle. "Perhaps," Zor said, "there is a middle path." All eyes turned to the ancient being. "We could demonstrate a fraction of our power," Zor explained. "Enough to deter the Council, but not so much as to awaken the greater forces that slumber in the dark between stars." Hope flickered in President Rodriguez's eyes. "Is that possible?" "It is not without risk," Elia warned. "But it may be your best option." The President nodded, a plan forming in her mind. She turned to Captain Harper. "Arrange a meeting with the Galactic Council. Tell them Earth is ready to respond to their ultimatum." As Captain Harper hurried off to make the arrangements, President Rodriguez looked up at the sleepers. "Thank you," she said softly. "I hope we're making the right choice." Zor's eyes glowed with an ancient light. "In all our eons of existence, we have learned one truth. There are no right choices, only choices we must live with." As night fell across a darkened Earth, humanity prepared to take its stand. With the sleepers by their side, they would face the Galactic Council. The fate of not just their world, but perhaps the entire universe, hung in the balance. The next morning, tension filled the air as Earth prepared for its meeting with the Galactic Council. In a field outside New York City, a large alien ship descended, kicking up dust and flattening the grass beneath it. From the ship emerged three figures, tall, slender beings with silvery skin and large, dark eyes. They were the representatives of the Galactic Council, and they moved with an air of superiority. Waiting for them was a small group of humans, led by President Rodriguez. Behind her stood Dr. Wong, Captain Harper, and a few other world leaders. And towering above them all was Zor, chosen to represent the sleepers. As the two groups faced each other, an uneasy silence fell over the field. The lead alien stepped forward, its voice translated through a device on its chest. "People of Earth," it said, "we are the Galactic Council. Have you made your decision? Will you submit to our rule?" President Rodriguez straightened her back, her voice steady as she replied, "We have made our decision. Earth will not submit." The aliens exchanged glances, their large eyes narrowing. "Then you choose extinction," the leader said coldly. But before it could continue, Zor stepped forward. The ground trembled slightly with each step of the massive being. The effect on the Galactic Council representatives was immediate. They stumbled back, their eyes wide with shock and fear. "Impossible," one of them whispered. "The ancients, they're just a myth." Zor's voice boomed across the field, filled with power that made the air itself vibrate. "We are no myth, as you can see. We are very real, and we stand with Earth." The lead alien seemed to struggle to regain its composure. But you abandoned the galaxy eons ago," Why would you protect these primitives? President Rodriguez stepped forward, standing tall despite being dwarfed by both Zor and the aliens. We woke them, she said proudly. Earth is under their protection now. The Galactic Council representatives huddled together, speaking rapidly in their own language. Fear was evident in their movements, their earlier arrogance completely gone. Finally, the leader turned back to face the Earth delegation. This changes things, it said hesitantly. Perhaps we can negotiate a different arrangement. But Zor shook its massive head. There will be no negotiation, it rumbled. You will leave this solar system and never return. That is not a request. To demonstrate its point, Zor raised one hand. The air around it began to shimmer and distort. Suddenly, one of the Galactic Council's massive ships in orbit began to move, as if pulled by an invisible force. It spun slowly at first, then faster and faster. The aliens watched in horror as their mighty vessel was tossed about like a toy. With a casual flick of Zor's wrist, the ship was flung out of Earth's orbit, hurtling towards the outer reaches of the solar system. That, Zor said calmly, was but a fraction of our power. Leave now, or we will show you more. The Galactic Council representatives didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled back to their ship, all pretense of dignity forgotten. As the ship took off, the lead alien's voice crackled over the translation device one last time. This isn't over. The galaxy will hear of this. President Rodriguez couldn't help but smile as she turned to Zor. Thank you, she said sincerely. Zor nodded solemnly. Do not thank us yet, little one. We have solved one problem, but in doing so, we may have created others. As they watched the Galactic Council's fleet hastily retreat from Earth's orbit, Captain Harper voiced the question on everyone's mind. What happens now? Dr. Wong, her eyes still wide from witnessing Zor's display of power, replied softly, Now we deal with the consequences of waking gods. The Earth had won its first intergalactic confrontation, but as Zor had warned, this was just the beginning. The universe had taken notice of the little blue planet and its powerful protectors. What challenges would this new attention bring? Only time would tell. In the days following Earth's confrontation with the Galactic Council, the planet buzzed with a mix of excitement and anxiety. News of the sleepers and their incredible powers spread quickly, changing humanity's understanding of their place in the universe. World leaders gathered at the United Nations headquarters in New York, joined by Zor and Elia of the Sleepers. The Grand Assembly Hall looked almost comically small with the towering ancient beings present. President Rodriguez addressed the gathered nations, her voice firm but tinged with awe. We stand at the dawn of a new era, she began. Earth is no longer alone, nor are we helpless in the face of advanced alien civilizations. As she spoke, screens around the hall showed images from space. The Galactic Council's retreating fleet was visible, broadcasting warnings about Earth and its guardians to every corner of the galaxy. Zor stepped forward, its massive form casting a shadow over half the room. Your world is now known to the galaxy, it rumbled. Some will fear you, others will seek alliances, many will be curious. The assembly hall erupted in murmurs and exclamations. The Chinese representative stood up, voicing the question on everyone's mind. What does this mean for Earth's future? Elia, the other sleeper present, answered. It means you must be prepared. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but also dangers. You have drawn the attention of forces beyond your current understanding. Over the next few hours, the sleepers shared knowledge about the galaxy that left the human leaders in awe. They learned of ancient spacefaring civilizations, of cosmic phenomena that defied Earth's laws of physics, and of galactic politics that spanned millions of years. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that humanity's role in the universe had fundamentally changed. They were no longer isolated on their small blue planet. They were players on a cosmic stage. Meanwhile, outside the UN building, crowds had gathered. People from all walks of life stood together, their eyes turned to the sky. The sight of the sleepers had been broadcast worldwide, and humanity was coming to terms with their new reality. In a small cafe across from the UN, a group of students sat glued to the television. Sarah, a young astrophysics major, turned to her friends with shining eyes. "Can you believe it?" she said excitedly. "All those sci-fi stories about ancient alien protectors, they're real." Her friend Miguel nodded, but looked worried. "Yeah, but what about what the sleepers said? About drawing attention to Earth? What if something worse than the Galactic Council comes for us?" As if in answer to Miguel's concerns, the TV showed Zor addressing the UN Assembly. The ancient being's words resonated across the globe. "We will guide you, but we cannot fight all your battles. Humanity must rise to meet the challenges ahead." Back in the assembly hall, the world leaders began to plan. They discussed forming a global space defense program, establishing protocols for future alien contacts, and ways to advance Earth's technology with the knowledge shared by the sleepers. As the session wound down, Dr. Wong approached Zor and Elia. "Will you stay awake?" she asked hesitantly. "Or will you return to your slumber?" Zor and Elia exchanged a look that seemed to contain eons of understanding. "We will remain partially awakened," Elia answered. "Enough to guide and protect when needed, but not so much as to draw the attention of greater powers." As night fell, the world began to adjust to its new reality. In homes across the globe, families discussed the day's events. Children looked at the stars with new wonder, knowing that somewhere out there, other civilizations were looking back. Earth had taken its first steps into a larger universe. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril. But with the sleepers as their guardians and their own human spirit of adventure and resilience, they were ready to face whatever the galaxy might throw their way. As Zor had said, humanity must rise to meet the challenges ahead. And rise they would, into the star-filled night of their cosmic future.